I will call to order the Finance Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting, which was duly noticed on October 13th, 2023, through posting a notification of the press in accordance with Wisconsin Statute 19.84. All right, first item, safety message. This week is National School Bus Safety Week. Couple of the items, well, more than 25 million children ride the yellow bus every school day, and the National School Bus Safety Week serves as a reminder for students, parents, teachers, and the community to keep school bus safety in the forefront of their minds. Here are a few tips to keep children safe at the bus stop. Number one, getting ready for school. Have children put everything they carry into the backpack or school bag so they won't drop things along the way. Encourage them to wear bright, contrasting colors to be more visible to drivers. Make sure children arrive at the bus stop before it's due, ideally at least 5 minutes early. Running after or in front of a bus is very dangerous. Number two, walking to the bus stop. Walk young children to the bus stop or encourage children to walk in groups. There's safety in numbers. Groups are easier for drivers to see. Practice good pedestrian behavior. Walk on the sidewalk, and if there is no sidewalk, stay out of the street. If you must walk in the street, walk single file, face traffic, and stay as close to the edge of the road as you can. Stop and look left, right, and then left again. If you must cross a street, do the same thing at driveways and alleys. Exaggerate your head turns and narrate your actions so your child knows you are looking left, right, and left. At the bus stop, have children wait in a location where drivers on the street can see them. Have them avoid waiting in a house or car. Do not let children play in the street. Playing with balls or other toys that could roll into the street is also very dangerous. Getting on and off the bus. Warn children that if they drop something getting on or off the bus, they should never pick it up. Instead, they should tell the driver and follow the driver's instructions. If you meet your child at the bus stop after school, wait on the side where the child will be dropped off, not across the street. Children can be so excited to see you after school that they dash across the street and forget the safety rules. And lastly, mobile devices. Cell phones and other electronic devices are often permitted on the school bus if they're in backpacks and other holders. Keeping hands free to use handrails getting on and off, the sound is muted, or the user is wearing headphones, earbuds, or similar devices. Content does not violate the law or school district policy and procedures. Use does not create a distraction. Use does not create a distraction for the driver. We want to make sure they're paying attention. So now I also included several links for this. So when we get our package, we can see that and catch up on the National School Bus Safety Week. Okay, is there a motion to adopt our agenda for today?
So done.
Motion by Carl, second by John. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. Next item, presentation of the fiscal 23-24 year-to-date through July financial summaries and consider approval to move to the full board. Mr. McCray.
Thank you very much. It's July that we're reviewing for your consideration. There's not a lot of activity that goes on in July. So you'll notice when you take a look at your revenues, minimal revenues, and then when you look at your expenses, just approximately $4 million, and I'm speaking specifically to Fund 10. Not a lot of other activity except for Fund 50 due to the summer meal program that is underway in the district.
Any questions? Is there a motion to accept?
So moved. Second.
Motion by John, second by Carl. So no further discussion. All those in favor of moving it to the full board, say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. Next, update on long-range facilities master planning. Mr. McCray.
Thank you very much. Dave Leader is not with us today. I expect his return tomorrow, so I am pinch hitting for him. Just a couple highlights as noted in your board docs document. During this last summer, EUA, Epstein Ewan Architects, the architectural firm we engaged to do, if you will, the facilities assessment along with their engineering partners, that has been accomplished over the summer. Then you'll also note that during late summer and actually up until today, Point of Beginnings has been looking at our athletic and activity spaces. They're actually out at Craig today. They also took a look at Riverside Park today. Again, that's a city-owned facility that we lease from the city. So they're wrapping up, and that again are two components of the overall assessment. And the other third component, and this is currently underway, I had the opportunity to visit Monroe last week and see firsthand EUA again conducting, if you will, the educational adequacy interview of Sally Pope, our capable principal there at Monroe. And a lot of, if you will, not only how is the building flowing and functioning, but instructionally, is the space adequate, right? It's a late 1950s era building. It is one of three triplets, Jackson and Madison being the other two. You know, how does that space look? So they're conducting those assessments, EUA as a team, in September and through October. And all of that is coming together for a high-level summary report to be presented to the Finance, Buildings, and Grounds Committee in December, and then a full report out to the board in January, accompanied by a workshop as well. And again, this is all part of our long-range facilities planning. I did skip a date. I believe at your November 14th board meeting, JP Cullen, most likely POB, Point of Beginnings, the civil and athletic activities firm, as well as EUA, will present kind of a high level, this is what's going on. So you got the Cliff Note version during this meeting. They're going to spend some time with the entire board and the community kind of outlining what we as a district have asked them to perform, which is an assessment of our facilities.
It's going to let me talk. And I talked to Greg about this. I don't necessarily see, as we go around, what are we doing for facilities for auditoriums, a variety of things. In our meeting for planning for the future, it was brought to me, my attention, and I went out to Edison School, and I looked at their auditorium. And they use that auditorium for the other, in the summer, for plays and that from the other two middle schools. And it's a mess. That's no other way to describe it. It's small. The backstage, it's dangerous. Risers are put in the hallway to store them. That's not safe. And I'm looking, are they looking at these facilities? Is there some way that we could do, I hate to say it, but an expansion in the back of the stage out into the sidewalk area and allows storage there? And we have to replace curtains there. I mean, the third one back has fallen down. They put it back up. The seats many of them are slashed and tore. They have a makeshift step-out stage on it, which I don't think is unsafe, but it's not really as good as it should be. So are we working on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and the answer shortly is yes. So again, part of the EUA assessment is engaging, and the name escapes me, a firm that specializes in theatrical and performance spaces, right? So whether it's Edison, Franklin, Craig, or Parker, right, our four buildings with auditoriums, they're reviewing that. So to your point, right, Craig was built in 1955. I believe Franklin was built in about 1967. I'm a big fan of mid-century architecture, so when I walk into the Franklin Auditorium, right, it's really appealing. But again, it's 55 years old.
Yeah.
To your point. And so over time, there's not been the investment to make it, if you will, up to today's standards.
And I appreciate that, but we do what we need for athletics. We have no trouble for it, and I'm all for that.
Right.
But the other part of it, not all children are involved in that. And some of the very important things are the various other activities such as band, orchestra, choirs, and that. And I know they aren't all equal to schools, but I really think maybe we ought to look at putting some investment in there.
I think in short, right, the overall assessment will take a look at the academic, the artistic, and the athletic/activity spaces. Right? There is in all three of those areas a great deal of pent-up demand. And I think part of the long-range facility master planning is really not being a la carte, but to have a multiple phase, just simply because I would contend that the deficit on the facility side is rather large. And so how do we address it over time? And that's not over time to say over the next 50 years, but it certainly can't be, should the board entertain a question in one question.
Well, I know we're doing greenhouses at the high school, for I think over $1 million each. And that's a replacement for greenhouses that were put in since they've been built. And I'm not against it. I won't stop that. I think all these things are wonderful things.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see more given into the arts, and that the middle school especially, which feeds the Parker program, I don't think they should be into this situation. I think there's the safety issues there, and there's just not room. And when all three schools use one school, it's a thing. So that, I'll pursue it further, but I don't want to be a hardhead. I just want to get it done.
Your feedback's
And that's all.
welcome.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
I can't help myself. I have to comment. And the assessment is really looking at everything. And this will be just one of those items that we collectively would have to say, what are our priorities? And over what period of time do they get addressed? So I understand those things, and as we talked about that, so.
Yep.
All right, next item, information, ESSER, Fund 46, long-term capital maintenance, and next level referendum work. That was a mouthful. Mr. McCray.
It was just my attempt to keep the agenda shorter, Commissioner Ardrey and the committee. So real quick, certainly a memo was included in your packet. Just wanted to keep you apprised as to what's going on at Franklin. And while some of the final window placements have taken effect over the recent weeks, work has really migrated, and this has been shared in the past, to the tunnels of the building, right? So to be out of the way of faculty and students in the learning environment. Work will begin as soon as school is over for the balance of work to be completed. Again, our target for spending ESSER, our final claim, has to be in by September 30th, 2024. So that's a little bit about ESSER. At Franklin. At Craig and Parker High Schools, Commissioner Dahmerhausen referenced greenhouses. Those two are ESSER funded. There is a little bit of a component of Fund 46 being used to provide some additional restroom space that would be available. That doesn't quite qualify as an ESSER funded component. That work is in the planning stages. Bids, as noted in the memo, have been received. And so we expect, again, that work to completed by the start of school in 2024. Fund 46, you may recall, we did an Act 32 energy exemption back in about 2017-18. We did not do the windows, so we're using Fund 46 dollars to finish the windows to really secure the building envelope at Addison. Then a little bit of a referendum update. So our building automation system is, if you will, antiquated. And so that has posed some problems, and problems meaning whether we're trying to control our direct digital control for HVAC equipment, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning within the buildings. Some of our buildings are still on old pneumatics using compressed air, right, to run our building systems, mechanical systems. For us to convert everything is a price tag that we can't necessarily afford out of a balance of referendum-approved dollars. And it wasn't really referendum-approved targeted, but a building automation system qualifies, and that was something on our list. And so we're investing in that. And again, as outlined in the memo, and I'll look down, is we're targeting Harrison, Jefferson, Kennedy, Roosevelt, Van Buren, Marshall, Parker, and Craig. And the intent there is to use an open sourced, if you will, software, meaning any device, it's agnostic and it can speak to that. There are particular vendors, such as our current vendor, where you need the software to speak to a specific controller, and it really limits the district to buying alternates that are perhaps less expensive. So moving to this type of software, and it's been part of a public bid package, so I can say it's Tritium is the parent company, Niagara is the software. So once we install Niagara in those facilities, right, we'll be able to have existing things such as actuators, which control dampers and air handlers, to be controlled by Niagara. We'll have to allow the remaining balance to be addressed by the long-range facilities master planning assessment, and then what our next steps are as a result of that assessment through prioritization and scope refinement. So, as a mouthful, some components that are tied to our building automation system, one is card access. So we talked in the past about expanding our card access. We will be able to do that, but we were wrestling with, do we do that with the old system to which we're looking to convert? So those buildings that we are converting to the Niagara software will be able to update, and then we'll have to marry back to the old system for a time for that expanded card access system. Right? So building automation systems, we talk about how boilers, if you will, are the heart of the building. The building automation system is the brain of the building. So until we solve that question, it's really difficult to build out, whether that's automatic card access, whether it's, again, controlling DDC, digital direct controls for HVAC, parking lot lighting, and we even want to get to the point, right, and Mr. Millard may remember this, is like, do we really want Allen wrenches everywhere, or do we want our doors, or at least high-volume doors, to be controlled electronically? So again, that's a building automation system issue. So we just received the bid, as noted in the memo on that. That's about a $750,000 expenditure. So we're very pleased with that movement in that direction. And then again, fire systems are extremely important to us. So MSA has been engaged, if you will. They're not a design build firm, but they are certainly a design firm. Off of those design documents, we'll be able to go out to bid to essentially upgrade complete systems, as well as, if you will, some of the head-end equipment, which enables a direct dial out, as noted in the memo.
Oh, okay. Is Marshall the only school in our district that's not tied directly into the fire system? You don't understand what I'm asking? When we did a walkthrough with Marshall, we were told that they could have a fire at Marshall unless somebody calls it in. It could burn for a half hour, whatever, and the fire department never knows.
Great question. Harrison and Marshall are the two schools, and that's why we're looking to update.
So is that a high priority? I suppose lots of, I guess it depends on,
Yeah.
that's not the way I wanted to put it.
No, it's fair. I think, we have to, when we look at fire safety, right, and just a reminder to those who are listening, right, is we have regularly practice fire drills at our buildings, right? So fire safety is something we take into great consideration. You know, we have updated our phone system, right? So we have phones everywhere, and that was a project undertaken, I can't remember when, but at least 5 to 7 years ago by our capable IT department. So, I mean, we're putting things in. To your point, you know, Commissioner Hannawall, like, is that, you know, today? Can we have it done today? You know, Marshall was built in 1997. It's 2023, so for the last 26 years, I've been here 4 of those 26. I think we're okay, but we need to address it, to your point, and the same with Harrison. Why they haven't been, I can't speak to that. It certainly is also one of the reasons we went to referendum, but, you know, it's kind of one thing through the gate at a time, so. Also, I should keep in mind, right, we have a great relationship with JFD. Right? And so, you know, not only are we conducting fire drills, I want to go back and talk about how our buildings are also frequently inspected by that capable department. If there was an issue, right, there would not be students there today, or last year, or for the last 26 years at Marshall.
So the building automation system, the specific schools that are listed, is there a reason why those and not others?
Yeah, in part, that's a great question. They're currently either entirely or mostly on direct digital controls already. If we were to, let's say, go to Adams Elementary and pull out all the pneumatics, right, essentially compressed air operating the mechanical equipment, that alone is probably a very low 7-figure dollar value item. So it really becomes the funding, and which is why we'll roll that into the overall assessment. So we have about $1 million to work with. So not a lot of resources, right? So that's why we went to that. It's easier to convert an open source software to speak to a Schneider controller at Craig via DDC, direct digital control, than it is to pull out pneumatics. That's kind of what we're doing at Franklin, right? Is we're pulling out all the pneumatics at Franklin, all the compressed air, all the copper piping that goes to run the majority of the mechanicals there. To DDC, and that's why you're looking at a greater than $8 million project alone at Franklin.
So if not quite the right question. So there are some buildings such as Franklin and Edison that were already prepared for those with what we have as system infrastructure. So the reason why particular buildings aren't listed can be because they're already well positioned, or we'd have to do a whole lot to get them there, such
Correct.
as Mr. McCray shared. So I thought it was important to really share that. I guess the one thing, and I know it kind of, the way you asked the question, John, it leaves me with the question is how many of us have fire extinguishers that are charged and ready to go in our homes today? I do, but if we just polled, some people do, some people don't. We all should have charged fire extinguishers ready to go, because you never know. Also, this is a little bit of, and as I'm saying this, Marshall Fire System, or lack thereof, is an interesting, we don't know what we don't know unless it's shared. You know, so my comment is this was important long before we get to 2023, but clearly it wasn't designed into the system, and since that point it wasn't pointed out that we should do it, which we probably should have a long time ago, so. I'm kind of stuck with the sort of the last bullet point of the memo. The ESC secure pathway remains in design stage. And one end, I hope it kind of remains in design stage. But I'll have to just move on, sorry. Any other questions or anything? Okay. If it's acceptable, can we go with the high school coach compensation before we dig into the budget and levy? If Mr. McLaury is prepared. And Dan?
Sure. Well, I think we'll stand for a little bit if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think District Athletic Director McLaury and I forecasted this coming to the committee, right? It's part of the budget development process back on August 15th. We just didn't really have any details. It's certainly been my pleasure to work with Mr. McLaury and his staff, the building level ADs, as we really kind of shift our paradigm a little bit and really look to address what's been an outstanding issue here in the School District of Janesville. I apologize I did not have this memo to you by the time this meeting was published last Friday, but you have it today, so I'm just quickly going to walk you through this. And then again, Mr. McLaury will chime in as he sees fit, so he has the microphone. We have nearly 150 high school coaches. Whether you're a head coach, if you will, head assistant coach, or a freshman coach. So I believe, refer to them as a varsity head coach, an assistant coach, and a JV2 coach, which is essentially the coach, I believe, who works with our freshman student athletes. Last year, and again, Mr. McLaury provides some great data with his team. With the support of his team, we had over 1,350 student athletes participating at our 9-12 levels. Our concern is, really, the last 12 years, there's been no movement in terms of coach compensation. Any increases in terms of coach compensation. So that takes us back to the 2011-2012 school year. That's, if you will, the background and the information. I do want to say, right, so we were really tight in our budget until the state's biennial budget, and the good news that we'll get into a little bit later in terms of affording the district some additional revenues, right? So that's always the challenge, right? We talked a lot about facilities earlier. We have lots of needs related to facilities. We have lots of needs related to student programming. And we have lots of needs, if you will, in terms of the ability to continue to recruit, retain, and train our staff, whether that's a certified instructor, a custodian, a paraprofessional, or a coach. We moved into, and again, to Mr. McLaury, some analysis here, how it was built, and this is not uncommon to the School District of Janesville, right? This is my 4th district. And at one point in time, way back when, during the days of collective bargaining, there would be a base wage established. And then we would compensate coaches as a percentage off of that base wage, depending upon the sport, right? So the world changed as a result of Act 10. Some base wages increased, some coach compensation models increased. When I was in Clinton, that's essentially what happened. Some are still locked into days of old, and that's kind of where we are. So we've made advancements in terms of compensating our staff since Act 10. We just haven't for our coaches, again, who serve over 1,350 student athletes. So some considerations as we move forward with a slightly different model. The length of each season. Right? So we really wanted to capture that in terms of regular season. Now, sometimes there are adjustments, right? And again, Mr. McLaury can attest to that in terms of the WIA determines the seasons. But for the most part, there is some stability there. We really look to, if you will, equity, all right? Whether you're coaching tennis or you're coaching football. As a former soccer coach, right, I would sometimes be bewildered in terms of, is not my time on the field just as valuable as in other sports? right? So trying to, if you will, kind of create that equity within the compensation. And really, I think it's our intent to avoid another 12-year timeline, all right? When I am 70 years old and hopefully not standing at this podium, asking for the board's consideration to adjust athletic coach compensation, right? So what we've outlined in the memo, if you will, is we need to examine this in 3 years, right, for the 26-27 school year. So the preceding year, when we're going through budget development, we need to take a look at that. All right, we're mandated to bargain every year, right, with our certified staff, right? We're always looking at our certified and non-certified staff every year. But again, for the last 12 plus years, we've kind of parked coaches to the side. Now I want to pause there for a moment and remind the committee and those who are listening, right? We also have an additive schedule, right? That's the FFA advisor, right? That's the band teacher during the summer, right? So Mr. Scott Garner is working on that. We'll work closely with him from the business office perspective, right? But that's also on the horizon. That's not part of this fiscal year's budget, right? This athletic coach compensation is part of this year's fiscal budget. So that's on the horizon, because sometimes there's the, well, what about? Right? So I wanted to address the what abouts as we speak. Varsity head coaches, so we're going to again kind of break it down. So just keep in mind, we're looking at, again, equity, right? And I make right towards the bottom there, 38 of 45 varsity head coaches, right, would be expected to see an increase. Some, if you will be, you're already above the projected model. All right, so we'll hold you there. And then in a few years, when we're reevaluating, we'll reevaluate you at that time. So you're not looking at a pay cut as the varsity head coach, right? You'll just be held. Same thing, if you will, as we look to our JV. It's actually 7 and 7. It's kind of interesting. We have some very successful, very respected, tenured coaches in some of our sports, right? So they've accelerated through. What's interesting, and again, Mr. McLaury, more so than me, can probably talk about this, is the churn at the freshman and some assistant level, right? Anyone who coached, right? If you coach and coach and coach, right? That's a huge commitment. I remember speaking with my wife one time who goes, love the fact that you love coaching, Dan, but for 3 months out of the year, right, I'm kind of by myself, right? So, being somewhat astute, I took that note and essentially retired from coaching, right? But there is some churn, right? So how do we reward our individuals, right, beyond a 12-year-old comp model, to continue to make that commitment to our student athletes? Varsity assistant coaches, I just quickly touched on that. And then again, JV coaches, also known as freshman coaches. So when you get into the math, right, what we have a tendency to do, right, is we split positions, right? So again, I'm not the AD here, right, but I pay attention to Mr. McLaury when he speaks, right? And as a former coach myself, I have a coach. I really would like 2, so we split. So sometimes the tracking can get a little wonky, right, in terms of what exactly do we have here, right? So sometimes track, right, and will not speak to the School District of Janesville, but I'll speak to some other districts that I've been associated with, right? There's the throwing coach, and some business managers and some administrations will say, well, take a position and split it 4 ways, right? So all of a sudden you got 16 track coaches, right? Because they each have a specialty. There's my high jump coach, there's my throw coach, right? There's my hurdles coach. So tracking all of this, right, and getting down to the exact dollar value for some of our assistants is tricky, particularly when we look at the averages. We track everyone, right, but some are split. And so really what we're looking at in terms of a fiscal analysis, right, and you have kind of a very small print, but keep in mind on page 3 there's a much larger schedule. It's not our intent, but we'll certainly entertain questions to go line by line. When we look at the varsity head coaches, right, approximately 45, because we only have 1 hockey team, right? So that's why we're at an odd number, right? So the current expenditures for those coaches is $243,000 at the varsity head coach level, right? That's the total spend, right? So we're really looking at an additional $47,000 in head coach compensation, right? And because I am who I am, we're always going to factor in FICA and WRS, and that's what drives it to 54,810. When we look at all other assistants, and those are your assistants plus your JV2 or your freshman coaches, right? It's a much larger pool. We have approximately 100 of those coaches, right? So their current comp is 284,000. We're looking at new comp of 77,000, right? And then all in, including FICA and WRS, because again, that's who I am, right, of 88,655. So all in, right, it's approximately $144,000. Keep in mind, right, if there are 3 individuals out for a freshman sport, we don't run a freshman sport. Right, we don't have there's not a freshman tennis coach, but if there were 40 freshmen coming out for tennis, right, Mr. McLaury would be visiting with Matt Sylvester Knutson and myself, figuring out, okay, how do we do this, right? Because we need to compensate to meet the demand of our student athlete, particularly at that level, where we're introducing the student athlete to the sport. That's my kind of quick overview. I'll pause. Maybe Mr. McLaury will join me if the committee has any questions.
I didn't realize we don't have a girls' hockey team? Or was that a co-op?
It's a co-op, yes, sir.
Okay, do we compensate into that co-op?
One would think I would know that question. I'm sure we do to some degree.
Okay. But it isn't in here.
Yes, we do, but largely the cost of participation for that co-op is passed on to the student athletes that are participating from the multiple districts.
So typically, right, it's the School District of Beloit. It's their coach. It is not our coach.
Okay. But we do supplement that somehow.
Yes. It's just not coach compensation. Yes.
Okay. It's the sport compensation. Got it. Thank you.
Co-op agreement would dictate.
Okay.
I was quiet when I said that. I was just saying the co-op agreement would dictate how the compensation flows between the districts on that one.
How much revenue do our total sports bring in? That's a stupid question.
No.
Oh, you were laughing. I thought, okay, maybe that wasn't something. And how does that compare with what we spend on our coaches?
Right, so I do not have that dollars
Okay,
off the top of my head, right? And I chuckled a little bit, right, only because our revenue are probably pennies and nickels, and our expenditures related to athletics are probably dollars.
so our programs really are not paying for equipment, coaches, blah, 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 blah.
Correct, right? So if you think about just the salaries for the varsity and assistant coaches, again, all the way down to JV2, right? You're probably $500,000 to $600,000. Gate revenue, right, is probably under 150.
Ain't in Texas, that's
Right. So and that's not uncommon to Janesville, right?
Right.
And you know, Superintendent Holtzman can speak to it. You know, we would have individuals come in and say, well, all those athletic fees and all that gate revenue, right? And to some extent, athletics is symbolic of every program within K-12. Is no program pays for itself, which is why we typically look to aggregate revenue. And the aggregate revenue being the district's revenue limit authority, grant funding, right? That's what, and you know, fortunately, right, the community supported an operating referendum.
you can probably appreciate this as you alluded to being a soccer coach, because I can appreciate what you're saying. Why are coaches compensated differently for sports?
So what we've tried to do off of the old model, and I can't speak to the design intent of the old model, is to really recognize for-year season commitment. So think of it as your compensation is determined by season length,
Okay,
right? So if my season's 12 weeks, I get a little bit more. Basketball, both girls and boys, and gymnastics, right, are the very long seasons, right? So they're compensated more, right, than a soccer coach, which is a 9 to 10 week season off the top of my head, right? But if we were to break it down on a weekly basis, it would be comparable.
what are associated hours? What does it, based on length of season, which I understand, and associated hours needed to track for consideration in the Affordable Care Act. What does associated hours?
Oh, yeah, great. So typically, and this came out 2015, 2016, when the Affordable Care Act was dawning. So what districts needed to do, if you will, was protect themselves from the part-time employee who all of a sudden amassed enough hours to which then they would not fall within a safe harbor via the Affordable Care Act, and they would qualify for health insurance. So sometimes what would happen is well, hey, I'm the, clipboard coach, right, respectfully, right, and I probably watch 40 hours of film for this team every week. Okay, how do we protect the district from that type of claim, right? Because the onus would be on the district to where you didn't protect yourself, so congratulations, Sue or John are now eligible for health insurance via the look-back period. Now, you may say, but it's only season. But sometimes what happens, right, and so we're just trying to manage our risk is, well, I'm the fall clipboard holder, the winter clipboard holder, the spring clipboard holder, and by the way, I work 20 hours as a paraprofessional in your district. So I would like the full family plan, and that's not really the intent, right? So within the, say, the contract or memorandum, whatever it is we have with our coaches, letter agreement, right, I hope we should be delineating that there's kind of a cap, right? This isn't, again, 40 hours of field time over the weekend in preparation for Tuesday's game. Those are the associated hours, right? Because again, now, right, and I'm stealing all of Mr. McLaury's thunder here, right? Used to be in the day, right, and as a former soccer coach, you'd say, well, I just didn't show up on day one of practice, right? What's going on in the winter for my spring sport? Or what's going on in the summer when I coached in the fall, right? What about that fundraiser? What about this? What about that, right? And so, right, there can be amassed a lot of hours, right? So we, yes, just like, teachers in the classroom, right, spend an inordinate amount of time, at home grading papers, right, but they're not hourly, right? So we just have to manage that from a district standpoint.
Is there any consideration for the number of participants based upon, how do I put this? You alluded to freshman tennis, I think, or whatever. In essence, you need at least 5 runners to have a cross-country team. You get let's say you get an influx and a large number. Does that impact any in terms of the wages or the compensation for the coach, the number of participants?
This model does not, and I would probably contend, and I'm thinking off the top of my feet here, whether you have 11 students in AP Physics or whether you have 23 students in AP Physics, your wage is the same.
Right, I understand that, but coaching's a little bit different than teaching. Well, it's a lot different than teaching in terms of, the number of people. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I guess I struggle with that because if and I know, having raised my kids in the district and seeing, the years where, I'm gonna use Parker's wrestling program.
Sure, sure.
You know, in the days of Kramer and Brown, you had every kid, on the west side wanting to wrestle,
Yeah.
including my two boys. Then there was a period of time they could barely field the varsity team,
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, if you've got a lot, granted, you said that we'd be looking at, okay, do we need another assistant coach or anything? But again, there's still that draw on demand upon the head coach's time with large numbers. So I'm probably rambling, but.
I'd say your comments are not unappreciated, right? And I know, Mr. McLaury is hearing those as well. I think it just gets into, it's fair, right? Classroom instruction versus coaching, right? But this is also, I think sometimes we try to balance, that's why we're trying not to have 28 children in kindergarten, right? And so how do we scale that back? And you'll see in the budget presentation, how we've targeted those early grade levels, right? In order to provide improved instruction from a student to teacher ratio standpoint.
Does popularity of sport have anything to do with how we compensate our coaches? Football, baseball, basketball versus, I don't know, cross-country soccer, whatever.
Yeah, that hasn't been taken into consideration. I guess the consistent way we've approached it is, regardless of the sport, it's important to the student athlete. So we've tried to really compensate each coach in each sport consistently, and really the factor that impacts that stipend is the length of the season and perhaps the hours per week intended for that particular.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because, I played football, my boys played football. I love football, but I don't think high school football is any more important than high school soccer or any of the other fall sports or anything else. And so even though people gravitate to the Friday night lights and blah, 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 I would hope, and I'm glad to hear that we're looking at season versus, I guess Texas mentality of football is whatever, next to God, so.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, information on the 2023-24 district budget and levy. Mr. McCray.
Just looking for a clock to see how we're doing on time here. You are getting a very high-level review of the budget, right? We'll certainly stay as long as the committee wishes to answer any questions that you may have. Keep in mind that next Tuesday is the full budget approval as well as the levy certification. So we're going to hit at some high levels here. I would be remiss if I didn't really thank Matthew Sylvester Knudsen, our Director of Finance, Tammy Carlson, who is our Grants Manager, Fiscal Analyst, as well as our ESSER 3 Program Manager. And really, it's even beyond those two. Folks within the business office, folks within People Services, curriculum, directors, principals, right? We are at that point to have the board consider the budget, right? So it's a true team effort. Keep in mind that I am somewhat unsettled at times, right? And I think only because I appreciate Deming's approach to continuous improvement, right? So I'm just never happy. I took an assessment today as kind of part of a professional development exercise. And the question was, are you judgmental? And the reality is, and my sons would say, yes, you are. And I probably am. But in fairness to others, right, I am probably hardest on myself. And then behind me is Commissioner Ardrey. No, just a little humor there on a Tuesday. Couple of highlights related to the state. So keep in mind that the district low revenue limit ceiling, which was at 10,000, has increased to 11,000. So that provides the district with some additional revenue opportunities. There was also a revenue limit increase of $325. That is baked into, for this district specifically, not just us alone, but specific to us in this particular instance, the increase to 11,000. So we don't go to 11,325. The 325 is baked into that $1,000 movement, in our case from 10,000 to 11,000. Right? We did lose, if you will, some low poverty aid. And when you look at the revenue limit worksheet, and you have a very large ledger, and we'll go through this in a little bit detail later on, but any aid you see on the revenue limit worksheet is really an offset in taxes. It's tax relief. We lost last year, I believe, off the top of my head, we had approximately $800,000 in low revenue, or excuse me, poverty aid, and we lost that. That was not part of the 23-25 biennial budget. We did see a slight increase in overall state aid. That goes into a large pool. And then keep in mind, to the chagrin of myself and probably the committee and the board, right, is there was a large dollar value put into the levy credit, right? So you may recall in past years in February, we would take a look at tax bills. In the upper right-hand corner of Rock County tax bills is the levy credit. There were hundreds of $millions poured into the levy credit. So when the district sets its levy, right, just at over $50 million, right, we believe, right, a portion of that will be offset by the levy credit. And it won't be $1, and it won't be 100,000. It will be much, much more. Right, so the district doesn't receive that money, right? It does, but it doesn't. And when I say it does, but it doesn't, is there's no levy check that comes to the district, right? We still will receive our $50 million, but local taxpayers will pay less. Right, so the money will go to the municipality will make us whole and send us the check. But it is property tax relief, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in February. Couple of highlights, if you will, by fund. Fund 10, keep in mind at the elementary level, and Superintendent Holtzman spoke of this during his spring staffing summary, we had 195 elementary teachers, core classroom teachers. That's outside of art, physical education, and music. All right, 195. All right, 10 of which were ESSER funded. We've reduced that. ESSER funding, ESSER 2 funding is gone, but we replenished 9 of those, right, with local funds. Right, so that's, again, our commitment for those small class sizes at the elementary level. So we didn't see classes rise, right? We met the demand. We also added, and this is Title IV funded, right? You don't see Title IV because it's a federal fund. We added a 0.5 safety and security, a former SRO, right, to assist us in terms of our relationships with JPD, Rock County Sheriff's Office, and then just really doing some of the bird dogging that needs to be done. So we have, as an example, the need to provide law enforcement with building maps. All right, well, we have some building maps, but we've made some modifications. And none of our maps are electronic, so how do we do this? Do we engage a vendor? Right, and we engage a vendor to provide the service, to which then we can provide that information over to JPD as well as JFD. We are looking, and we talked about this at the last committee meeting, right? We will have a surplus of funds related to the increase in revenue limit authority, right? Approximately $2.5 million. We're looking to take that $2.5 million, prepay our debt. Thank you, Mr. Hannawall, for acknowledging what sense that makes. Prepaying some of our debt related to Fund 38, right, the quote-unquote WRS debt, which relates to the merger of the 2 retirement systems and making that whole. We had the finance. If we pay that off sooner than later, that frees up dollars operationally. Right, the annual payment for that is just over $1.1 million. The more years we can chop off, those years are then available at that amount to support instruction and district operations. Keep in mind, we increased summer school and curriculum writing compensation to be more market competitive. We are looking, as you see, to increase high school coach compensation, first time in 12 years. And the other thing, right, it's not an annual cost, but we're investing approximately $2 million in technology to support instruction and district operations. That's everything from our wireless network to iMacs to servers, right? You probably heard me refer to in the past, when a business invests in technology, there's hopefully a cost savings. When we invest in technology, there's not so much of a cost savings. We're just really making not only our operations more efficient, but our instruction more accessible and embracing today's tools. Keep in mind, right, to the board's credit, and we were able to do this because of the increase in revenue afforded to us by the state budget, is 8% was on the table. For a base wage increase, right? Note that that nets out to approximately 5.9. You were able to exercise that, right? So that's great for our instructional staff. It's great for our support staff to receive that 5.9% increase, right? That wasn't on the table until the budget passed, and the board took advantage of that. And keep in mind that we are winding down our ESSER funding. The 23-24 is the last year of ESSER funding. I referenced it earlier, right? The final claim is due September 30th, 2024. That's ESSER 3, and we're done, right? So one of the things through the budget development process that administratively we'll be working through, and then as a board and as a committee we're keeping you abreast of, right, is winding down some positions because there was there was learning loss incurred. And so we implemented some positions to address learning loss. Keep in mind, and this is not almost to the year, we were really intentful. Some districts were reliant upon ESSER funding just to run, right? We've not done that, right? Maybe just a hair, right? We have used ESSER funding to purchase curriculum. This last year, using ESSER 3 funding, we purchased nearly $1.5 million in curriculum. Wonders curriculum specifically, which is a language arts curriculum. Right, so some of the things we're going to have to think through is how do we continue an investment in our curriculum when we don't have those federal funds? Are there some targeted positions that have a really good, if you will, academic return on investment that we want to continue to move forward? Right, it's not everything, but there are some. In addition to how do we continue to provide really good instruction, right, to our students, to our community, right, and that requires investment. But ESSER 3 is winding down. I'm shifting to Fund 27. So we added special education, 4.5 FTEs within special education. Sorry for the redundancy there, to meet the demands of our students. Right, Fund 38 I spoke to earlier, right? The sooner we can pay off the WRS portion of that debt, that frees up operational dollars in the future, right? And we're gonna need those operational dollars. So we have some dollars now. Instead of applying them towards a recurring cost, let's apply them towards that because our recurring costs will catch up to that window and we won't have $2.5 million every year. Fund 46, we continue work at Franklin and Edison, right? I think our assessment, right, and I appreciate Commissioner Dahmerhausen and others commenting on the fact that, all right, after the assessment, right, we can really begin to address long-range facility planning. And that is not only necessarily a debt question, that is that how do we leverage our limited funds within 46? How do we, if we're looking to address perhaps artistic space, Commissioner Dahmerhausen, or athletic space, once we've identified a need and that's part of our long-range plan, right, can we fundraise for portions of that? Right, because now we have a plan. And it's not just going into a pot to be divvied up, it's targeted. And we can see that and others have done that. It's not the only source, right? But it complements that really well. Fund 50, right? So last committee meeting, right, we've talked about, we have two low wage groups, right? So one being our clerks, one being our student nutrition staff, right? That served over 1.5 million meals last year, right? We're competing in the workplace, right? So we have built that within our Fund 50 budget, right? And again, part of it is not just adding it, it's truly understanding, do our revenues support that? Right? And they do, right? So if you could help us out, stop by school when you're on tour next and buy an adult meal, we would really appreciate that. And for Fund 80, we've traditionally levied $175,000 in that fund, right? So we're looking to up that by $25,000. Now, when you say 25,000, and we wrote a memo on this, I believe, at the last finance committee meeting, right? Is someone going to all of a sudden get we need a window, right? And that window is to hopefully address in hiring someone on a part-time basis to support that noteworthy process, right? So I think last year, right, and Denise, I'm kind of looking off the corner of my eye, I think last year we served over 350 families, right? And so right now, that's, just to recap, last committee, that's other duties assigned for Ms. Jensen and her capable army of volunteers, right? We've reduced support to the Board of Education. We've consolidated those duties within Ms. Jensen, in addition to her role supporting as the executive assistant to the superintendent, right? We had a great concert, right? We're raising funds, right? Hunger, right, is still present in our community, right? That's our charge. We've accepted that, I should say, right? So how do we continue to support that? So that's that nominal $25,000 increase in that particular role. We may not exercise all 25, but it gives us a window in which to work. That's kind of my notes in terms of the high level. I'm going to quickly go through the PowerPoint, but I'll pause if there are any questions at this moment.
Touch on one thing, because I brought it up before. Is it possible to make sure that every child has a free lunch and breakfast? Can we add funds to the federal? I'm not sure if we can touch it, how we can touch it, or if we even want to, but that would be one of my goals.
And thank you for that, right? There's a reason I'm 245 pounds, and it's because I don't work out and I really love food. So I embrace the need for nourishment. You know, Liz Liedel, our Director of Student Nutrition, and I have had this conversation, right? You may recall Van Buren came online to be a CEP, Community Eligibility School. For us to do that district-wide, right, we'll drain whatever monies we have within Fund 50, and then we'll most likely require a transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 50.
We could do it, is in other words,
You
but
could-
do we want to?
Well, it's, right, so that's, that, I'm in a tough spot in terms of, right, does Dan McCray, the CFO, want to or not want to feed children in the district for free? So I think my humble suggestion, right, is we continue to advocate, as Liz does, at the national level, right, and even at the state level. It's a component of Governor Evers' budget to provide and continue to provide free breakfast, lunch for students. That was not part of the budget. It was part during the pandemic, right? We have not seen that funding at the federal level. Governor Evers was going to use the state surplus, right? And of course, at the federal level, it's just going to be funded through the National School Lunch Program. We would love that. The challenge becomes is what in Fund 10 do you not want to fund in order to bail out Fund 50?
Well, I don't know if the word should be bail out, but whether we need to supplement.
You would have to bail it out. There would be a transfer from Fund 10 every year to Fund 50.
Okay.
Now, I don't know the dollar value. It's more than one, less than $1 million, but somewhere in between.
So to me, it sounds like supplement, not bail it out. Supplement means make it possible because we do supplement it and that. But the question is, how do we arrive and how do we get the community to want to support that?
And so Liz and I, again, in discussion, I think one of the things we wanted to develop, right, because you're asked questions out in the community, right? And I think part of how we wanted to operate in the last 4 years, right, as a district financially, and there are many things, but is to move beyond transparency, but to provide clarity. So you, as board members, are informed, either at the committee or as the board as a whole. So Liz and I talked about, she's on vacation this week, is do we kind of craft the FAQ and do we do some modeling to show the impact, right? It's great, all right, but there is an impact, right? Because when they have a zero balance in their fund balance and they run a negative, it is a transfer.
I understand, but it's possible. Not necessary.
Well, what's always, and this has been, and yes, and I'll just, so indulge me, if you will, for a moment. It's kind of like if a district we deficit spend, and as a highly aidable district, we would get more aid. I'm not sure, though, that that's a fiscal policy.
Well, I'm
we
not
want
trying to open it up at the moment. I'm trying to look at it in the long run. Can we achieve that? Because there are implications if some children are borderline or whatever, because the lines are drawn very hard, and you're on this side or you're on this side, and that creates some problems and some inequality in the classroom or in the lunchroom where children go. And I would love to have it where nobody asks a question, just let them eat.
And keep in mind, and yes, and sorry, as we talk through, and not to prolong the discussion from my part, certainly it's your privilege to do so, is when we look to reduce, we're already underwriting that as a district. Right, so we've taken a step. I think Liz and I will spend some time, we'll prepare some information for the committee and for the board.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So if I can, so how I look at this is, can we absolutely can do it.
That's what I wanted to know,
We
really.
absolutely can do it, but in lieu of what? So we just had a discussion and information on coaches' compensation. So if we didn't do that, could we feed more kids with that 140-some thousand? Yes, we could. If we said we were gonna have higher teacher-to-pupil ratios in classrooms, yes, we could do it. So it's in lieu of what? So then it becomes, as the administration looks at everything, this is where we're at. Now, we as a board, if we directed them to shift that focus to, if we said, we want to make sure every student has a free lunch, breakfast, and that is how the budget is developed, then that's how it would need to be done. But it would be in lieu of something that we're doing today.
Because our total budget is encapsulated and it has to roll in that encapsulation, this from that, and everything else. So we just can't run the budget the way we might like to. We have to go within the rules.
We can't go out and raise revenue. We can accept revenue, so anyone that's watching, feel free to donate several million, and we can take care of
Well, I'm not sure it'd be
Commissioner
that
Dahmer's
much, but
housing.
It would be serious money.
But to make sure it goes on for a long time,
Okay.
it would be several million. So
Thank you.
that's what I was, so I
Sounds
thought
like
it was
track meet,
important.
doesn't it?
Thought it was important to just, yes, we can do it, but it's in lieu of something, so.
So I'm just quickly going to plow through the slide deck, right, because I hit a lot of highlights. So reading, algebra, right, continue to be focuses or math instruction of the district. And so when we look at small class sizes and targeted areas, right, our budget is looking to support that. We could always, when I say we could always do more, right, if we did more, then what is it we would not be doing? I talked a little bit about some of the budget influencers from ESSER. Just a reminder that we are now in year 3 of a 4-year non-recurring operating referendum. We saw or will see an increase, right? There is no declining enrollment exemption this year of $4 million. Talked about the low revenue limit ceiling as well as the increase in revenue limit authority. We saw $0 in per student categorical aid. And then keep in mind, right, we are a people-oriented business. Human resources, and need to continue to recruit, retain, and reward our staff. Again, year 3 of 4, we have a fund balance, or excuse me, our Fund 10 is a balanced budget at $142.9 million in revenues and expenditures. You can add another $22.6 million in terms of Fund 27 revenues and expenditures. Right, so some pretty large dollar values. Keep in mind, oh, yes.
I'm just asking for practicality purposes. Is there a reason like one of these is highlighted and the rest of them are not?
Fund 10 and 27 are our operating funds.
No, I'm not talking about just this slide. On every slide, there's one that's like dark and the rest
Oh.
of them are blank. Is that a picture thing or is that because that's the most important thing?
It's the most important thing on that slide. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's kind of what
Yes, sir. This is me being overly creative. So right now, no one's distracted other than focusing on Fund 27, balanced at 22.6 million. The district September enrollment, so Kim Perenboom, her staff, do an exceptional job, right? In most districts, as part of the business office, we're more than happy to have Kim Perenboom and her staff do that. Our FTE is down 7 from 9108 to 9110. That's our September count. And when we work through the revenue limit worksheet, keep in mind we're looking at summer school as an FTE, the September FTE, and the independent charter school as an FTE. This is the third year of a growing number related to us taxing for the independent charter school. And I think I asked this question before. Does anyone guess what the independent charter school is and where it is by name and location? The Lincoln Academy in Beloit. Yes.
Is 7, down 7, is that a significant number? Because, there's always that, I know this is not a poll, where they say there's a margin of error of 4% each.
Right.
I know this is a very accurate count, but is 7 that much different than up 7 or stay even?
In this case, I would say stay even or growing is always better than going down, right? So Kim was explicit. There's a difference between enrollment, right, essentially the seat count, and membership. And fiscally, we're really focused on the membership, right? And that's capturing our students who reside in our district and who either attend our district or attend another public school via open enrollment. But we do get to add on for the independent charter school, which technically is a public school. I skipped over this. If I can go back. We were targeting, as part of our budget planning, for this to be the third year of 46.9 million in change. The increase in the low revenue limit ceiling and the revenue limit authority kind of took that consideration out of the equation. So we will see a jump from 46.9 to 50.2 million in our levy for all funds. Fund 10, Fund 38, Fund 39 long-term debt, and Fund 80 community service. But keep in mind, we're expecting, right, and the state legislature dumped hundreds of millions of dollars more into the levy credit. Right, so our taxpayers will not necessarily be picking up all 50.2 million. And again, we'll review that again in February. You may recall in the past, we were levying in advance related to debt service to then defease for debt, right, to prepay our debt, to then position us for potential debt question. We've seen a shift. So rather than continue levying in advance for debt at the high level we were, right, we've absorbed that plus operationally within the district's revenue limit authority for operations and not debt. And you'll see that on a slide towards the end of the presentation. Our mill rate, thanks in part to a 12% property value increase, will drop from 741 to 705. We've always talked about the various school finance components. Membership, I touched on. Members for us, right, equate to revenue. And sometimes people will use that as, well, they just want to count kids. Well, we do want to count kids, right? But really, we're here to educate children. Here, you just see, if you will, kind of a trend line down. Matt Sylvester Knutson and I always have a disagreement in terms of should it go from history to present or from present to history in terms of how the chart is organized. September open enrollment. During this next year, we will have to take a little bit of a deeper dive into. When I came in September 2019, we were plus 250 students. Right? There's a correlation, but no causation. I just want to make that clear, right? To where now we are minus 10 net, right? So plus 250 students, more students coming into the district than leaving the district. Now we have more students leaving the district than coming into the district. right? And so we really saw things turn during the pandemic, whether that's moving, right? And this is open enrollment, and this is our draft data as of 11/2, right? So we'll refine this between now and the next meeting. Revenue limit, I've gone over this several times with the committee in the past, right? Base revenue, all the way through, everything is calculated on a 3-year average. So Mr. Hannawall, back to your question in terms of 7. Well, 7 is actually 1/3 of 7, right? So we're not capturing all 7 times 11,000 in year 1, because that 7 goes into a larger bucket of students on a 3-year rolling average. It's kind of like 6/10 for 4K. We're able to count 4K students, right, either community-based or within our own district buildings, as a 0.6 FTE. So they're really a 0.2 FTE, and they're really only with us for 1 year. Right? While it's a 3-year rolling average, right, that student in that 0.6 FTE is with us for 1 year. The revenue limit authority within the revenue limit is Fund 10, Fund 38, and Fund 41. We do not exercise capital expansion or Fund 41. We do have a Fund 46, right? If we exercised and or if you will, levied within Fund 41 and made that designation, that would be less out of operations, and we need it in operations. I'll just go over this for a few minutes, right? This is me geeking out, so thanks for your patience, right? So A is our base revenue, B is our third Friday count, C is our rolling 3-year average, D, if you will, is really the 3-year rolling average, E is our property value. That went up 12%. So we were $6 billion in change, now we're $7.1 billion. And that comes into play when you're calculating K, right? So we take our levy, divide by our TID out, the $7+ billion, and that gets us our mill rate of $7.05. And I won't geek out anymore in terms of, so that 12% is new construction, you know, what is that? So we'll save that for another day. F, if you recall, is our 11,000 revenue limit ceiling. That increase from 10, we were the lowest in Rock County. Of the 7 school districts in Rock County, we were at 10. We moved to 11. So one of the reasons when you're at 10 and we were below 10, we were one of the lowest spending per member districts in the state, because we were conservative back in 1993, right, when revenue limits were imposed, right? So you're locked in, and there's this low revenue limit ceiling. That's nothing we can control. That's a legislated item. Right, I think in 2020, 21, it went from 9,700 to 10, and now it's gone up to 11. Yep.
So when we were at 10, we were the lowest in the area.
Yeah.
How does 11 put us now? In the middle?
No. Milton was slightly ahead of us, excuse me, right? So you may recall Milton failed their operating referendum, right? So they were going to get their 325 and not yet hit 11. All right, so that, I think, legislation either passed or is about to pass, so they'll move to 11 just like us. If you take who has the highest revenue limit per member, Clinton, right, which I think is, we'll say 12.5 to 12.7, they'll get another $325. So they'll be pushing 13,000. We'll be pushing 11. All right, now to further geek out on you, Mr. Hannawell, right, we went to an operating referendum, right? So we weren't getting it at the low revenue limit ceiling. We needed to ask the voters for additional support. The voters were kind enough to provide us that support. So that 11, if you factor in, right, the 11.5 million now that we'll have as a result of year 3 of the operating referendum, that does push us up. Right, so I want to be clear. I just don't have that number off the top of my head, right? But it does push us up. But when you look at base, right, base revenue, right, is kind of the common currency. If we fail an operating referendum, should the board choose to go in November of 2024, right? There's one more chance in April of 25. Otherwise, you're looking at reducing 14.5 million, and you're at 11,000. You're not going to get that if you will, added impact of the revenue of the operating referendum. So you look at base revenue, but you always have to look at the operating revenue from a referendum. You should add those two together. I just want to be clear so I'm not accused of, right, figures lie, liars figure, I'm a business manager, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Confuse people, no one knows what the heck I'm talking about, right? That's again where we try to go back to. Transparency is just throwing it out there, looking to clarity is what we're really trying to accomplish here. Great question. You have recurring, non-recurring exemptions, right? You have it, I'm always available for questions. It really comes down to operationally, we're levying 43 million and change for operations, and that includes, right, 11 million as part of an operating referendum. Then you have your debt service and community service on top of that, some back pay taxes. Someone appealed, right? We got to give the money back. It's only 1,002. Thankfully, this year there's no dark store issues, right? Sometimes those would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? We don't have that recently, right? 50.2 million, $7.05. There's a sliver that this could change between now and next Tuesday. Just a sliver. We're looking to confirm our Challenge Academy participants, right? I don't think that'll change, right? We're locked in as to when they were attending on Third Friday count, but we just have to confirm that data with the Department of Public Instruction. We're not going to spend a lot of time on equalization aid. Sorry, I just kind of skipped a few, right? We are still positively aided as a district. That's good for us. Revenue and expenses I referenced earlier, right? ESSER 1 is done. ESSER 2 concluded this last fiscal year. We're in the final months, if you will, of ESSER 3. I'm not going to go through this, but this is really, if you will, our Fund 10 revenues by source. You'll always see federal is very high. In the past, when you would see others, such as in 21, 22 at 6 million, keep in mind we still have to, but we're just not leasing this year in terms of initiating a new lease when you book the full value of that lease. Keep in mind that's a GASB requirement. I think it's GASB, I can't remember the GASB off the top of my head, Governmental Accounting Standards Board. You record the revenue and the expense related to lease agreements, right? That has a tendency to jack things up, but all you're doing is really recording a transaction. It's not new revenue. You'll have a visitor next Tuesday. The gentleman comes every year, right? He'll ask a few questions, right? He's the only one who shows up for an annual meeting by choice, right? So, and this is looking, I know it's a square pie, right? Being a fan of Rocky Rococo's, right? But it just talks, if you will, about the light blue color from size-wise represents our state aid, right? Local is blue. Then we look at our federal and other district sources. Fund 10, expenses by function. Keep in mind the function is, if you will, the where. Objects are the what, functions are the where. So it's everything from instruction to business administration, and you're gonna say, holy smokers, McCrae, you got a huge business administration budget there. What's going on? Is that what's happening in finance and accounting over here? Keep in mind that's everything from student transportation to utilities to ESSER-funded construction work, right? There's a lot of things that go into the 250,000 function, also known as business administration. Instruction, though, is still what we do. Yes, sir.
Transfers?
Transfers, great question. So transfers typically are going to be your special ed transfer from Fund 10 to 27, because keep in mind we saw a minor increase in aid related to Fund 27. I think it went up a point or two, right? So we're just, I think, tickling 33% reimbursement. The remaining balance comes from Fund 10. That's a transfer. The other item that you'll see in there, and thank you, Commissioner Ardrey, right, is it's budgeted at $2.5 million to transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 38. We spoke about that earlier. So I think our fund transfer off the top of my head is about 13 million in special ed, and then about another 2.5 million in the 10 to 38 transfer. And just looking at our expenses by where. Instruction should be our largest colored box. It's what we do. It's our mission. Revenues by source, you can see the transfer to your point, Commissioner Ardrey, just 12 13 million, sorry, I was looking at the 22-23 actual. So it went up approximately $1 million. And again, just looking at it's the largest source. Ideally, I think the governor, right, Governor Evers in his budget proposal, he would prefer to have, as would we, less dark blue and more aqua blue, right? It just didn't come to fruition. The more aqua blue or state support we would have, then the less of a transfer we would have from Fund 10, right? Then maybe we can consider doing the meal program Commissioner Dahmerhausen was chatting about, or the 1 million other opportunities we have. Expense by function, instruction is the dominant expense. Purchase services, you're going to see business administration at 1.2 million. A majority of that really is related to student transportation for students with IEPs. I wanted to highlight and circle on the slide deck here, Fund 38. Again, we're booking that transfer at 2.5 million, right? That's part of the budget proposal for your consideration. We talked, I think, about the merits of that to great length. Fund 39, we're really only levying for our scheduled debt. And in the past, we would levy in advance to prepay, similar to saving interest payments on your home mortgage, as well as position ourselves as the district for a potential debt question. Commissioner Murray always asks, right, so what's our balances? How much Fund 38 debt do we have and how much Fund 39 debt do we have? So that's included in this slide deck here, and this is payments after, payments as of now, I should say. Keep in mind, you're gonna say, well, where'd that 2.5 million go? The 2.5 million is an assumed payment. We're just capturing it now. We'll place those funds in escrow, and then, right, when the bondholders are due their payment, they're paid out of the escrow fund. It's still an expense for us. We're just incurring it a little bit earlier. There still is a schedule. Associated Bank, who is our paying agent, will abide by for those bondholders. Fund 46, long-term capital maintenance, as well as Fund 49, capital projects. This is where we still have some remaining referendum dollars in Fund 49. Fund 46, again, we're a little bit in and out related to Franklin and Edison and some other small projects that are escaping me at the moment for the district. We typically don't capture revenues throughout the year other than potential investment revenue, right? So right now, interest rates are north of 5, right? So we're garnering some revenue in both in all of our funds where we have investments, right? And investments sometimes are just a holding place until we spend dollars, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Student nutrition budget, again, it probably operates at approximately 6.1 million in revenue. We look to balance at 6.1 million in expenses. Fund 80 community service, you will note in the 23-24, as mentioned earlier, the $25,000 proposed increase for supporting Bags of Hope. Fund 21 and Fund 73 are fiduciary funds. We're not operating those as an operational fund. Fund 21 would be an example of FFA. Or if the football team has a fundraising and they want to run it on the district's books rather than on the boosters' books, those are housed in Fund 21. Fund 73 is our employee benefit trust fund for OPEB, other post-employment benefit obligation. Fund balance, right? So we finished this year up $550,000 to $24.55 million. So respectful to our friends at the Gazette, right, and never pick an argument with someone who buys ink by the barrel, right? It is not a rainy day fund, right? It is a fund balance at a point in time. Sometimes it's comprised of cash, prepaid expenses, right, and accounts receivable, right? In November, once again, you'll be asked, right, for a line of credit authorization, right? It just bridges us a gap. You say, well, your fund balance keeps going up. And yes, that's a good thing, but so too do our expenses, right? And this is our unrestricted fund balance. A restricted item within fund balance would be something such as CSF or common school funds, right, which don't have to be expended, right? That's from the Department of Lands, right? So we receive money to fund our libraries from those. We may carry a balance, but it's a restricted balance. We can't spend it on salaries, as an example. And mill rate. So I referenced this earlier in the presentation. You will see essentially 23-24 an amount of $40 million. That's an increase of $10.6 million in the fund levy. A majority of that due to the increase, right, of our low revenue limit floor. It's not really a ceiling, it's a floor. You'll see non-referendum debt, that just increased 6240, right? Property chargebacks are 1,002, they're down $2,800. The referendum approved levy, right? And this is where, right, if anyone subscribes to Wisconsin Policy Forum, or maybe there's been a news flash via WSAB, Wisconsin Association for School Boards, right? To levy or not to levy is the question. If we wanted to continue to levy in advance, manage the mill rate, keep it at 741, and then as board commissioners, you can say, we're 741, didn't change, but the levy went up. Right, so we're trying to be very conscientious of levy management, which is why you see an increase in the operational, but you see not quite nearly an offset, but you see an offset in debt. We're not levying in advance. Right, and we're trying to target and go from 46.9 to 50.2 responsibly. That's our goal administratively to present to the board. $3.1 million increase from the prior year of the levy. Keep in mind, right, there's significant investment in the levy credit that none of us in this room get to take credit for. Now, the city of Janesville is going through a property revaluation, right? So there are 95 to 105 off the top of my head, right? They're good people over at the city of Janesville. That's the target. They're in the 70s. So that's why you're seeing that nearly 30 to 40%. If you come in at average, you're golden. If you come in below, you're even better. If your assessment went up above average, you're going to blame the district and say, well, that's because of the $3.1 million. You said, maybe. I don't know, right? Your property value went up. Why did it go up, right? Did you put on a 3-car garage? What did you do, right? I mean, these are just things which it's difficult for you as commissioners. It's difficult for me to do a, lot by lot, if you will, explanation of an individual property taxpayer's tax bill. We deal in equalized values. The city deals in assessed values. We pass on an equalized levy. The city parses that out, factors in the levy credit, hopefully reduces, right, that 3.1 million, and it will be reduced to minimize the impact. But if someone says you're taxing more, the fact of the matter is we are. You as a board, administratively, we are recommending you levy to your full authority. Or you could deficit spend. But that's not been this board's objective. And nor would it be administration's recommendation. So, right, because we have to play the long game. Mill rate, I referenced this earlier, 50 million divided by 7.1 million times 1,000 gets us to 705. Down from 741, but yet we're levying 3.1 million more. And this just takes a look, if you will, at our mill rate over time. Keep in mind, right, so sometimes, I'm perceived as a number guys, and I certainly appreciate that stereotype, but I struggle with stereotypes. It really is administratively, and even from the office of the chief financial officer, everyone in business services, everyone in facilities, everyone in student nutrition, right, is in support of our district's way forward. Right? No money, no mission, no mission, no money. So we're here to support instruction in the classroom. And I'll extend that to athletics, right? We'll extend it to the arts, academics, arts, and athletics.
cliche, it's all Greek to me, does not apply here, having taken a year of Greek. I just want to thank you for, I look at this, and I'm not a numbers person, as I've told you before. I appreciate the work that you and your team have done to break this down so that the average layperson can understand it without being overwhelmed by looking at a spreadsheet. You and your team are to be commended. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much, and I will pass that on to them.
Do you need a motion to move this forward? Okay.
This was just information for us at this point. Quick question. I know, in looking at the big ledger sheet, it comments about the October 15th certification. And it was a struggle to look at DPI's website to look at that. Has it actually come out yet? The final,
The final 8 certification?
Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
It is 72.1 million. It's a $500,000 less than the July 1st estimate. So then within the Revenue Limited Authority, right, we transfer that to local property taxpayers. Less aid, more taxes, more aid, less taxes.
Sure, yeah. I was looking
Great
for
question.
that and I
Right.
didn't see
I-
that, so.
I will, right, and right, you'll always find me to be extremely open. There is a typo on the very large ledger sheet, right, but it is not on an important value from a calculation standpoint. The TIF out value did not go up 7.5%. It went up 12%. That's a carryover from last year. But the property value on the left side, right, highlighted by E, is correct. That comes out October 1st every year. In our budget assumptions, we typically assume 2. Right? So that's a very conservative, but I would still argue, I think maybe one year we did 4, right? So because you don't want to overestimate that, because then it's a surprise. Oh, the mill rate really went up. Or, it really went down.
And maybe this is just Greg, and this isn't for this budget year, but at some point, I think it would be good, particularly as we're looking at responding to the debt that was created at 06, 07, 8, and 10, to encapsulate what we've done to strategically really reduce the impact of that over the years. We've taken a lot of actions to do that, provided education for students over that period of time. Impact, yes. Bigger impact was not related to any of our management of the dollars. It was more of what happened to us. So I think it would just be important, and I'm thinking to the future, as we tell our story, part of the story that we tell is how have we used the resources that we've asked for? Not just that's what was given, but what we've specifically asked for, whether it was updating Craig and Parker, most recently, obviously, the secure pathways and the operational funds. And really, we've looked at being able to address that debt as soon as we possibly could, as opposed to just letting it roll. I mean, I guess that's an important piece. More of a statement than a question, but really as a thought as we look at early next year probably. So, is there any other questions?
I agree.
Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. McCray.
Thank you.
Our last item, is there any future items for us to address from the committee members, or we'll keep rolling with the agenda that we have? Not, our next meeting will be November 21st at 4 o'clock here at the ESC. Thank you. We are adjourned.